For decades, military planners in the US have had this one major worry looming over everything else: a massive, great power conflict with China. And well, that possibility, it's not some far off, abstract idea anymore. It's a terrifying prospect, and believe me, it's being taken very, very seriously at the highest levels. So, this is the question, right? The one that keeps generals and diplomats up at night. I mean, we're not just talking about the world's two biggest economies here. These are two nuclear-armed military giants. A conflict between them wouldn't just send ripples across the globe. It would be an absolute tidal wave. The stakes are, well, they're almost impossibly high. And look, that's not me being dramatic. That's a direct quote from Michael O'Hanlon at the Brookings Institution, and it just lays bare how catastrophic this could all be. We are talking about a conflict that could spiral way beyond anyone's control. So the real question is, how are both sides actually preparing for this incredibly dangerous possibility? Okay, to really get what's going on with China's military, you have to look at their grand strategy for the Pacific. For years and years, the US Navy and Air Force have, basically ruled the seas and the skies. China's main goal is to flip that script, especially right in its own backyard. And they've developed this really formidable strategy to do it. It's known in military circles as anti-access/area denial, or A2/AD for short. The whole concept is actually pretty simple, but it's incredibly powerful. Just think of it like a giant defensive bubble, a massive keep-out zone that's designed to make it extremely dangerous for US aircraft carriers and jets to get anywhere near China's coast. So how does this whole bubble thing work? Well, it really breaks down into a simple two-step process. You've got your sensors and you've got your shooters. First, you need the sensors, this huge network of satellites, crazy over-the-horizon radars, drones, all designed to find and lock onto an enemy ship or plane. Then come the shooters, a massive arsenal of long-range missiles, fired from land, from ships, from planes, all designed to win the war in the skies and on the seas, from hundreds, if not thousands of miles away. Okay, so China has this powerful A2/AD strategy in place. The next question is obvious. Where might they actually use it? Where are these powder kegs that could just ignite a massive conflict? Well, if you ask the analysts, they almost all consistently point to two major flashpoints. These are the spots where the interests of China, the US, and its allies are really on a direct collision course. On one hand, you have the South China Sea. It's this incredibly complex web of simmering disputes over tiny islands and fishing rights between China and its neighbors. And a lot of them, like the Philippines, are allies with the US. Then, on the other hand, you have the really high-stakes black and white standoff over Taiwan, the democratic island that Beijing is absolutely determined to bring under its control, by force if it has to. And this right here is what military folks call the first island chain. It's basically a line of islands running from Japan right through Taiwan and down to the Philippines. For the US and its allies, it's a defensive line. But for China, it's a wall that they feel they have to break through to really project their power out into the wider Pacific. Honestly, whether or not China decides to invade this chain, that might be the single biggest decision that could lead us into a World War III. So, to really understand what's at stake along this critical line, let's zoom in on one really crucial link in that chain: the Philippines. It's here that you can really see how these huge geopolitical forces are playing out on the ground, for real people and for a real country. For almost 60 years, the main job of the Philippine military was fighting rebellions at home. Their whole focus was internal. But as China gets more and more assertive, it's forcing smaller countries like the Philippines to make this huge, once-in-a-generation choice: stick with their deep economic ties to Beijing, or double down on their long-standing security ties with Washington. You can actually see this huge strategic pivot happening through their ambitious modernization plan. It's called the Horizon Program. It started out with Horizon 1, which was really about the basics, just getting better maritime awareness. Then Horizon 2 started to balance internal and external defense. And now this redesigned Horizon 3 is squarely focused on building up the Navy and Air Force with serious stuff, like anti-ship missiles, to counter that growing external threat. But look, this kind of pivot is incredibly difficult. The Philippines is basically trying to overcome decades of neglect. It's facing huge challenges, from not having enough money and a painfully slow process for buying new equipment, to the massive task of changing a military that has always been dominated by its army. It's a real race against time. Okay, so let's zoom back out to the big picture. With the board all set and the pieces moving, what is the most likely scenario over Taiwan that could actually pull the trigger and start a war, dragging the United States right into it? We often picture a massive D-Day style invasion across the Taiwan Strait. But most military analysts see that as a huge and maybe even an unnecessary roll of the dice for China. Instead, they're worried about a different option, one that's way more subtle, harder to counter, and maybe even more likely to work. The most credible and, frankly, the most dangerous military option is a blockade, a naval and aerial quarantine of the island designed to just slowly strangle Taiwan's economy and force it into submission, all without ever having to fire a single shot on the island itself. And here's why it's so incredibly dangerous. An invasion? That's an all-or-nothing gamble. It either works or it's a catastrophe. But a blockade? Its intensity can be dialed up or down, kind of like a dimmer switch on a light. It puts all the pressure, the entire burden of escalation, squarely on the United States. Does the U.S. Navy risk starting World War III by trying to run that blockade and firing on Chinese ships? It's a total strategic nightmare, with no easy answers. Which just brings us right back to the ultimate stakes. The main goal for everyone involved here, Beijing, Taipei, and Washington, can't be about winning a war. It has to be about preventing one from ever starting in the first place. A war that, once it begins, might be absolutely impossible to stop. And so, we're left with this one final, crucial question. As China's military power grows, and America's allies in the region rearm, both sides are building up their forces to scare the other guy off, to deter them. But in this Pacific powder keg, the line between deterrence and provocation is razor thin. The real question is, can that delicate balance possibly hold?